Hello, everybody. Good morning. So when I was last here, I told you, and I've been so honored. This is my fifth time to be here. I told you about, thank you, Ray Meyer, who was the former head of the DePaul Blue Demons basketball team. When he was 90 years old, he said there are three stages in life: youth, adulthood, and you look good. So I'm looking out at this audience and I'm thinking, you look good. On the same subject, I think it was George Burns. I don't know if anybody can identify with this. When he was in his 90s, he said, at my age, when I bend down to tie my shoes, I think, is there anything else I should be doing while I'm down here? My previous lecture on my recent book, Getting Wiser, 101 Essential Life Lessons and Inspiring Ideas. In this book, I asked 101 remarkable people that I've known, what's one life lesson that you would want to pass on to the next generation? And I've been so fortunate to have met some interesting people in my lifetime, to have been in the right place at the right time. This is Abraham Maslow, who was my mentor in college. And as was mentioned, I was the doctor for the White Sox. This is Wilbur Wood, and I'm still in touch with him, and the doctor for the Bulls. And I was able to win 2 championship rings. So this book does seem to have struck a chord. I've gotten feedback literally from all over the world, from 12 countries. And this talk is Getting Wiser, Part 2. So in part 1, just to refresh your memory, this was General Will Levine, who helped liberate the Dachau concentration camp. This was Cecilia Conrad, whose father, Dr. Emmett Conrad, was one of the first African-American surgeons in Dallas. He was on the school board, and for 10 years at every meeting, a woman came and sat on the front row in Ku Klux Klan regalia, and he never said a word against her. And this is his daughter, and she took his lessons that you keep your eye on the prize. So she is now the head of the MacArthur Foundation and gives the MacArthur grants. This is Thomas Kirk, who was shot down over North Vietnam. He was in the North Vietnamese notorious Hanoi Hilton prison camp for 6 years. He was in solitary confinement for 2 years. Among other things, spent 2 hours a day practicing on an imaginary flute. Said that he immediately forgave his captors when he was released. He said they were fighting for a cause they believed in. I was fighting for a cause I believed in. He subsequently went back to help North Vietnam with their farming. This is Bud Frazier. I've got my only shirt that I'm wearing today. And anyway, Bud Frazier is an amazing man. He's a leading heart surgeon in Houston, Texas. He's performed 1,300 heart transplants, but more important, he's very creative and thinks outside the box. Specifically, everyone knows that a heart pumps, and so if you're going to build an artificial heart, you need to build one that pumps. However, a mechanical heart that pumps wears out, so it's not a permanent solution. So Bud Frazier thought outside the box and has created a pulseless artificial heart with a continuous flow mechanism. It's been successfully implanted in 50 cattle and is hopefully going to get FDA approval this year. If that's the case, this could change the world because there are millions of people who have heart failure. So that's Bud Frazier. This is my friend Eli Siegel, who was head of the AmeriCorps program and was able to shepherd that program through Congress by answering a baseball question. So if some of you weren't here, I can tell you about that in the question and answer period. By the way, the most fun typically is the question and answer period. So I hope we can get into that. So this is my 104-year-old mother at her celebrating her 104th birthday. She lived through the Depression, World War II, many serious illnesses, the loss of a child, but she was always an optimist and always filled with gratitude. Every day, literally, she would say, I'm grateful I can be grateful. And one of her favorite mantras is, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. That we have choices. And this is my theme this morning, that we can't always choose our circumstances, but we do have choices as to how we respond. So I was going to talk to you about a few other people in the book, and I hope you find their stories as inspiring as I do. This is Tom Herskowitz with his wife, Rita. I met Tom as a patient approximately 40 years ago, and he and his wife have become very close friends. When I asked Tom what one life lesson he would pass on, he responded with the following remarkable story. He said, September the 7th, 1950, the Hungarian-Austrian border. I was a 3-year-old with a runny nose and soggy clothes firmly planted in the cold mud. My 1-year-old sister was next to me sobbing. My mother, usually a meticulously outfitted beauty, was in shambles. A burly Russian border guard mumbled in broken English that if she turned toward her children, he would shoot her and her children. The father, Tom's father, had just been killed by that same Russian guard. And so the mother, Tom's mother, was put in a notorious prison. Tom and his sister were placed in an orphanage. He said the situation was not adversity, it was calamity. He was force-fed spinach and fish from a polluted nearby stream. The dream of America, which is where they were trying to escape to, was far away. So fast forward to 1946, his mother was out of jail and just married, and once again, they were trying to escape. Fortunately, this time successfully. So Tom arrived in this country at age 10. He could not speak a word of English. He went on to attend Syracuse University and became president of Kraft Frozen Foods. So his lesson, if there's an America waiting for you, don't quit until you get there. His wife, his mother, Terry Herskowitz, said, when she tried again, we must go. I want a better life for my children. This is one of my mother's brothers, Isidore. He was affectionately known as Uncle Wiz. He was always outspoken. He lived in Galveston, Texas. He was president of the Galveston Philosophical Society. Their motto was, we agree to disagree without being disagreeable. Something very useful for us today. He was active in the civil rights movement long before others became involved. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed 145 pounds, dripping wet, So he didn't exactly fit the image of a courageous warrior. But there was an incident that became family legend that took place in the early 1960s. He was a young optometrist, and in his office, there was a African-American woman who was waiting to be seen, and a very large, big, burly Texan came into the office. And when Uncle Wiz took the lady back into the office, this Texan said, "Hey, are you going to take her before you take me?" So Uncle Wiz took the woman back to her office, to his office. He returned to this large, burly Texan, and he said, "Listen, you no good racist, get the hell out of here right now. And if you have any friends, tell them to stay out also." The man left, but he returned a week later. Uncle Wiz realized that, he saw his life passing before him, and thought that this man easily could be there to kill him. And but instead, it's a happy ending. The man apologized for his earlier behavior, and as Wiz said, he even bought 2 pairs of glasses. So the bottom line is character matters, doing the right thing, even when the right thing is hard to do. So I've known this pediatric dentist, Dennis Connolly, seen here, since we were in the Air Force in England almost 50 years ago. I recently asked him who was the most important teacher in his life. So what follows is his response. At age 8, a wonderful gift arrived in my life when my mother gave birth to a baby boy named George, soon to be nicknamed Juddy. Without his conscious knowledge, he profoundly affected every individual in my family. I vividly remember working in our yard when my dad, who was a hardworking ex-Marine with a high level of expectations for himself and his children, came home from visiting my mom in the hospital. I rushed toward him and asked, "Dad, boy or girl?" He gruffly stated, "Your brother has some problems. I expect twice as much out of you now." At that time, I had no idea what he meant. The next day, my mom and new brother came home. He was a beautiful redheaded boy with Down syndrome. Some of what life throws at us, as Dennis says, may be interpreted as a heavy burden or welcomed as an exceptional gift. The first impact that my brother had on me was feeling love and a wish to help this innocent child. He was slower to demonstrate those things that we take for granted in babies, crawling and walking and speech. Somehow at my pre-adolescent age, I wanted to protect and help him. I developed patience that I previously had not identified with myself. When my neighbor kids or relatives avoided him or treated him with uneasiness or even ridicule, I became more defensive. This evolved into greater empathy. As I grew into my teenage years, my only brother continued to need assistance, but he seemed happy. That observation led me to my personal appreciation for all the abilities I could tap into and utilize that he did not possess. Judy passed away at age 7 from congenital heart disease. Dennis goes on and says, as my life and education progressed, the memory of my brother influenced me to pursue the profession of pediatric dentistry, where about 25% of my patients had special needs or were underserved. The empathy that developed from my relationship with my brother and the consequential appreciation led me to volunteer with health team cares in Central America, inner city clinics, and the programs that served children with special needs. As I've aged, I've been severely restricted because of macular degeneration. The gift of my brother, Judy, in my life has taught me about patience, empathy, and allows me to look at my current situation, although with a blurry view, to realize my limitations and appreciate my opportunities. I believe that we can regard many of the people we meet as teachers if we're open to learning and growing. Judy taught me generously without realizing he was teaching, and my life has been much more fulfilled because of him. I do have a different shirt. That's kind of regarding inspiring people, Jeff Tabin, although this is Jeff Tabin. I've mentioned Jeff in previous talks, but I wanted to remind you that all the profits from the sale of my books go to the Himalayan Cataract Project. And there are, I have brought the books with me. Jeff Tabin started an organization 30 years ago, the Himalayan Cataract Project. He himself has operated on more than 100,000 patients. And the way I like to to visualize this is imagine a football stadium filled with patients who were unable to see and could see perfectly after Jeff operated on them. But Jeff's main purpose isn't his own surgery, but it's to teach other doctors in underserved areas how to perform the surgery. As a result, this organization has performed over 1 million cataract surgeries, and all at no cost to the patient. My wife and I visited Jeff in Ghana, and here he is in the operating room with other physicians. This is a gentleman who's been blind for years, and this is the moment that the bandage comes off, one day after surgery. It's really one of the most thrilling sights you can ever imagine. Many of these patients, imagine this, are seeing their children and grandchildren for the first time. Now, for a long time, when I compared myself to Jeff Tabin, I felt very inadequate. I knew I could never affect the lives of so many people. But then I realized that my job wasn't to try to be a poor imitation of Jeff Tabin, but to be the best Michael Lewis I could be. I love Mother Teresa's saying that not all of us can do great things, but each of us can do small things with great love. And one of my favorite sayings is from Oscar Wilde: "Be yourself, everybody else is already taken." And a new favorite quotation that I just came across recently on the same topic: "Don't measure yourself by somebody else's yardstick." So I wanted to leave you with the following example of how, as we all know, how that the fragility of life and how it can help us maintain perspective. This again is Abraham Maslow, and on June 8th, 1970, he collapsed from a heart attack and suddenly died. He'd had a cardiac event 19 months before and almost died, and realized that every moment after that was a gift. And he actually coined the term post-mortem life, which is being so appreciative of every moment of life, knowing what a gift it is. This is Bill Wennington, who's with the Bulls. On September 8th, 1994, he was scheduled to go on U.S. Air Flight 427 to Pittsburgh. He missed the flight, and the result was that all 132 people on that flight died in a crash. So Bill Wennington also told me that as a result of this event, he has much more humility. He gives much more time to his charities, and he tries to be a better teammate and a better husband and a better father. And he gets less bent out of shape by the small stuff. So I had a sort of a mini experience, much less dramatic. Approximately 10 years ago, I had an episode of stomach pains, and I went to the emergency room, and the initial diagnosis was cancer of the pancreas. So I was terrified. I thought about family and friends that I'd never see again. Fortunately, subsequent tests ruled that it wasn't anything serious, but that also was a major wake-up call. Because when you feel the angel of death hovering nearby, it really focuses your attention. And I promised myself from that day forward, I'd make every moment count, and I would take nothing for granted. So I wanted to. So among the lessons that we're learning is the importance of serving others, find new things to be grateful for each day, finding the divine spark in each person, performing frequent acts of kindness, and holding on to joyful experiences. This is a story that I just can't stop thinking about that I recently heard. This is a hairstylist, and his name is David Wagner. And as a lark, a few years ago, he on his business card, he wrote Daymaker. You know, you go in and you'll get a nice shampoo and you'll feel good about yourself. So one day, a woman came in and she had a regular appointment, but she came in early for the appointment, and she said, I especially want to look good for tonight. So David Wagner spent an especially, he just gave her an especially wonderful shampoo and a very loving hairstyling. And a few days later, he got a note from her. And the note said, I was planning on going home that night and committing suicide. But because you were so loving and so kind to me, I wound up getting help. I'm in a very different place now, and you literally saved my life. And so David kept thinking to himself, what if I had been upset? What if I had been distracted? What if I'd been hurried? So again, to me, it's just such a powerful lesson of the importance of being in the moment, and that the smallest acts of kindness can have a significant impact far greater than we could imagine. So in addition to this book, I do have these other books here. This is photographs from all 7 continents. This is a book of photographs of birds from all 7 continents. This is a book about my mentor, Abraham Maslow, who coined the term self-actualization. And then this is a book about my experiences with Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson and Abraham Maslow and many others. So finally, I wanted to leave you with this advice from Mark Twain. He said, "Let us endeavor to live our life so that when we come to die, even the undertaker will be unhappy." Since we're talking about Mark Twain, one of my favorite quotes of his is when he was asked about the afterlife, he said, well, between heaven and hell, I'm keeping my options open because I have friends in both places. So I want to end on a positive note. Studies show that as we get older, we get better at savoring. We appreciate small pleasures, being present for them, and holding on to joyful experiences. We know our time's limited, so we tend to spend it more wisely. And try to remember each of us is still a work in progress. We continue to hope, to tell stories, to serve, and to love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. We want to take questions first from the auditorium. Dr. Lewis, that was wonderful. I've admired all of your presentations. At the beginning of today, you said you were going to save an answer for the question and answer. You recall what that was? You were going to tell us about it. Was it a story?
Oh, the baseball story.
Okay.
So this is a true story. Eli Siegel and I both attended Brandeis University, and he was president of the class, and I was vice president. My political career came to a crashing halt, but he became Bill Clinton's campaign manager. And so Bill Clinton appointed him to be head of the AmeriCorps program. What that meant was that he had to shepherd it through Congress. And then as now, there's a lot of polarization. So one of his good friends was Jay Rockefeller, who was the senator from West Virginia. And the other senator from West Virginia was Senator Byrd. And Eli needed to get to Senator Byrd because if he could convince Senator Byrd would convince all the Southern senators, and that would get AmeriCorps through. So Eli said to Jay Rockefeller, please let me, set up this interview. And Jay Rockefeller said, Eli, I love you, but I've used up all my clout with him, and I'm sorry I can't do it. So Eli, at this point, looks around the office and he sees photographs on the wall in Jay Rockefeller's office of baseball players from the 1950s. So Eli says, I tell you what, ask me a question about baseball from the 50s. Eli was from Brooklyn. And if I get it right, you'll get me the interview. If not, I'll leave you alone. So Jay Rockefeller took the bait and he said to Eli, who was the original organist in Ebbets Field? And Eli, for I think the only time in his life, let his ego get the best of him. And he said, and this is AmeriCorps writing on this, he said, Gladys Gooding, but that's too easy. Give me another one. So then Jay Rockefeller said, well, who was involved in the trade when the Giants got Al Dark? Eli said, they got Al Dark and Eddie Stanky, and they traded Sid Gordon. So that was the right answer. Eli got his interview with Senator Byrd. He convinced Senator Byrd, and AmeriCorps became the law of the land. The true story as far as creativity.
It's not a question. I just wanted to tell you that my mother had 6 brothers and 4 sisters. My father had 4 brothers and 5 sisters. And one of the oldest brother was named Isidore, but we always called him Uncle Izzy.
So,
And I have done an act of kindness, I realized today. This is my friend from my Meadow Lake, which is right across the street. And I had told her to come in with me, and so we could enjoy this and eat pizza.
thank you for being here.
Thank you.
While we're looking for some other questions, let me first remind the group that you're not going to get pizza till 11:30. So, there's another question here.
Books.
All right, let's wait until the end, and then we'll go. You can step up there, and the doctor could answer
Okay.
that.
How much are your books?
The books are, each of the books are $20, and the large book was $50, but for you, $25 today.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question while we're waiting for others from the auditorium. You have met some really marvelous people, and not all of them have been celebrities. You have seen something in some of these people. I would first make a comment. I think each of us have run across in our lives those stories if we look hard enough. Would you agree that it's not just the celebrity that like the Michael Jordans that can inspire us, but it could be the other people that we run into our lives? You want to comment on that?
Well, I 100% agree with you, and many of the people in the book are people that one would not have heard of. I think of, as a response to your question, I think about Bill Veeck, and we could talk about Bill Veeck, the owner of the White Sox, who is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Just a sidebar on Bill Veeck. He had a wooden leg, and the first time I saw him use a hole that he cut out in his wooden leg as an ashtray, my eyes almost popped out of my head. And he was extremely creative and had a wonderful sense of humor. But to your point, to me, Bill Veeck illustrated the true meaning of the word sophistication. He was so comfortable with himself that he made everyone around him comfortable, and enjoyed talking literature with the media, talking medicine with the doctors, talking baseball with the average fan. And he went along with the Dale Carnegie saying, you make more friends in 2 months by being interested in other people than you do in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. I think each of us have many stories to tell. One compliment that I did get when we discussed my book in a book group is that this particular person said, I've known a lot of famous people, but I don't necessarily extract life lessons, but you're good about extracting life lessons. So I took that as a compliment.
One of the most powerful persons in your life was your mother. And I would have to share that too. Your mother, 104. Our mom died at almost 102. And they shared the same philosophy about the 10% of what happens to you and the 90% that you look at. Now, you're a medical doctor by profession. How much does this apply to us with respect to looking at the future that we may have? The years that hopefully we have. Is there a difference in the people's attitude that adds to their longevity? I mean, in my mom, I can see that, and you apparently saw that in yours.
Well, I think that's a wonderful question. And I think we all know that to reach that age, you need a lot of luck. You know, you need, this is not just attitude. You need to have had the right genes and just had a lot of luck, because we all know extraordinary people who have positive attitudes that have had terrible tragedy and haven't lived that long. But one of the points specifically that I think very much applies to this group that I've talked about in the past is the importance of relationships. Another quality my mother had was she was a real extrovert, and she would focus her full attention on the person in front of her at that moment. On her 104th birthday, she literally got something like 100 phone calls or emails. She called every one of them back. With each person, she knew, you know, how is your grandchild? Is he still into soccer? You know, with each person. But the point I was going to make in relation to this group is the importance of relationships. There was a very famous Harvard longitudinal study that started in 1938, and they studied the Harvard class of 1938. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of extremely prominent people in that class. It included John Kennedy, included Bill Bradley. So they did intensive medical and psychological studies, and they concluded that it wasn't money, it wasn't power, and it wasn't prestige that led to the most satisfying life. It's relationships. So the way I would phrase it is that the people in this room in a group like this isn't the icing on the cake. This is the cake.
Well said. And in my mother's case, at 100, she was teaching Eastern European caretakers how to swear in Italian. Last question, sir. Doctor, you have met some wonderful people. Do you have a list of wish list of people that you wish you could run into? And what might you ask them if you did? What would you be looking for from some of the people that we might know that you just say, gosh, I would really love to get at and find out the story behind fill in names?
Well, there's so many people that I would still love to meet, but when I think about questions to ask, I found so many interesting answers in this book, Getting Wiser. So just for example, I found that a lot of the very prominent people actually were extremely humble, that humility was a common characteristic. That was one thing that I found very interesting. And I could elaborate and I'll give you one example of somebody that you would have heard of. Michael McCaskey, the owner of the Bears, was a very good friend of mine, and my wife and I spent a lot of time with him. And he actually was very humble and talked frequently about his grandfather, George Hallis. And not everybody knows this, but George Hallis was the son of immigrants. And yes, he owned the Bears. And at the same time, every week, he wrote and mimeographed 7 public PR releases to give to the 7 papers in Chicago. He washed and folded the clothes and the socks for the players and rode the team bus. So he was someone that you may not have thought of is someone who really emphasized humility. And that was true of so many people.
Doctor, we have a couple of questions from the auditorium.
I have not a question, but a comment which might fit with one of those sayings you have up there. This is from a store in Northbrook called the Book Bin. And every month they publish a little series of authors and books they've sold, and lots of very good store, by the way. And they had a little cartoon at the bottom of their monthly letter. And one cartoon says, you only live once. And the other cartoon says, no, you only die once, you live every day. So I thought that was poignant.
Did you say, was this the book bin
Yeah.
that you mentioned? Because one of the people in the book is Roberta Rubin, who is the owner of the bin or the book stall in Winnetka. Right.
Doctor, can you tell us about your relationship with Michael Jordan?
Be very happy to. I spent a lot of time with Michael Jordan, and I'll share 2 or 3 experiences with him. One was this illustrated his sense of obligation to the game, which is not necessarily something people know about. It was 10 minutes before a game, and they were playing Minnesota, and he could hardly move his neck. He was moving like this. So I naively suggested that he not play that night. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, people have come from hundreds and sometimes thousands of miles away to see me, and I'm not going to disappoint them. And during his time with the Bulls, the team played in 179 playoff games. You can guess how many Michael Jordan played in. 179. That's astonishing. So the two players that worked harder than anyone else that I worked with, Michael Jordan in basketball and Carlton Fisk in baseball, worked harder than every one of their teammates. Another story about Michael Jordan was one night he and I were in the training room together, and his father's alleged killers came on TV. As you might remember, his father was murdered in a robbery. And Michael Jordan just looked up at the screen and looked up at me, and he just shrugged his shoulders. And I took that as a sign of the following. First of all, I knew that he loved his father as much as any son ever did. His father was his best friend. And yet he knew that spending an ounce of energy thinking about his father's killers was not going to bring his father back. And he had a game to focus on that night. So his ability to eliminate distractions and to focus to me was remarkable. A side story, not directly, indirectly related to Michael, is that the very first night when I was the Bulls doctor, one of the perks was that we could park in the players' parking lot, which was right next to the United Center. And when and then after the game, it was sort of down in a lower area, and there were thousands of people around waiting to get a look at the players. So the very first night when I came out to go to my car, thousands of people were shouting, "Michael, Michael." And I just couldn't figure out how they knew my name. One other, I mean, I could tell you several, but one other Michael Jordan story that illustrates to me a wonderful example of leadership by example. This was, some of you may remember this, they were in the NBA Finals with Phoenix, and they unexpectedly lost a game in Chicago, Game 5, which would have cinched the playoffs. So they had to, it meant going back to Phoenix and potentially play 2 games to win one, to win the finals. So players were not in a good mood. And when they were getting on the private plane, they all were carrying their large suitcases to prepare for, potentially 2 games. And Michael Jordan comes walking up and he has a small valise in his hand. And he says, "Gentlemen, we're not going to be here long enough, to have any overnight clothes. We're just going to be here for 1 game, and you can guess the result." Suddenly, the mood dramatically changed. And it was just to me, a powerful example of leading by example. He wasn't as verbal, but that was typical.
We have time for you to be able to be at your table and have those that are interested to look at your book. We thank you very much, and I'll turn this back to Bob to conclude our meeting with Fred.
Thank you.